Hey everyone, Dr. Brent Siebel back with you for another amazing installment. That's my opinion. Amazing installment of Make It Happen. This is a series we host at Arizona State University, Ira A. Fulton Schools of Engineering, to espouse an entrepreneurial mindset to all of our students who are thinking about changing the world as engineers. But more broadly, this is open to any change-making student, faculty, staff, alumni of Arizona State University, anybody, quite frankly, around the world, regardless of discipline, regardless of interest area, who wants to learn tips and tricks from the pros, people that have been there, done that within their careers, sharing basically, I wish somebody would have told me about this sooner, or I wish somebody would have opened my eyes to this amazing strategy. So we're really thrilled to have my close friend and colleague, Dan Visa, with us today. He has been impacted throughout his career in the realm of mentorship and paying it forward. And I think Dan is going to draw some parallels to the emerging world of disruptive technology in which he brokers and ways in which you might be a disruptive force within the organization you're a part of, and how you might in turn benefit from great mentors that exist within not only ASU, but in most organizations, and ultimately chart a course ahead to make the world a better place. So without further ado, Dan, thank you so much for being here. I'll give you a few seconds here if you want to share your screen, but we'd love to hear a more thorough introduction from you specifically. And we've got a great group of several ASU affiliates who have joined us here today.
Well, thanks, Brent, and welcome everybody. It's certainly my pleasure to be here. Even though I'm in the unenviable position of being the last Friday of this current session of Make It Happen series, and at the end of your first full week of classes. So for those of you who are joining that are students, I certainly want to thank you for taking the time today. I hope I give you a few nuggets of insight to consider as you go forward, not only in your student career, but hopefully in your working careers, which I do hope is long and prosperous for you all. My background in particular is 30 plus years in the technology industry, and I say that in a very broadly speaking manner. I've been involved in a good number of different technologies, industries, markets, products, etc. And so, I can certainly lay claim that I am a diverse, I have a diverse background, and some may claim that I'm a master of none of them. But I do think it brings an interesting perspective from my viewpoint into observing different challenges that surface across a spectrum of different applications, markets, business types, etc. And that's what I hope to bring to you today. And so Brent asked me to talk about disruptive technology knowledge and how it may transform into competitive advantage. I'm going to kind of turn that around and talk about something that I feel isn't talked about, isn't taught about, and isn't generally embraced as often as I think it could be or should be, in order to really bring disruption and value to a business, whether it's your own or a company you might work for. And that's to talk about the business model and the strategic and competitive advantages that the business model itself may have. And I'm going to walk through, I think, some interesting examples, talk about, how in general, the companies that end up succeeding actually aren't the ones that innovate the technology that is causing, disruptive or value, but rather they're taking advantage of it in a unique way. So I'll pause there and see if there's anything else, Brent, that you want to opine on before we kind of jump into the material.
Oh, that's great. I love plot twists. So thank you, Dan, for making this your own. And whatever you have to talk about, I'm excited about, because I mentioned Dan and I are friends and colleagues. Dan does a great job supporting many students term after term in a course we offer called Entrepreneurship and Value Creation. So I know the students that Dan works with, both inside and outside of the classroom, have found tremendous value in all of the resources that he has. And I'm excited to hear what he has to share here today. So yeah, go for it.
Right on. Okay, cool. So listen, if you've been listening or participating in any of these Make It Happen sessions, or maybe if you've gone back and seen some of the sessions that Brent has videotaped, you've probably run across a couple of our colleagues that also are supporting Brent in the entrepreneurship and value creation class. Marcus Kennedy gave I think, a tremendous brief talk on the virtue of being impatient with your career, impatient in how you attack problems. I would encourage you to go and listen to that. And then Gabe Gasca, just a couple of weeks ago, I think, effectively gave a very similar talk in encouraging people to fail and fail fast and to learn from those failures. I'm going to kind of incorporate some of those, hopefully, and touch on, expanding that into a third domain, which is thinking about how you deliver the value in an enterprise that you might be involved with. Again, it could be your company as a startup that you're considering creating, or you've already are participating in, or even a larger company, as we see here in some of the, as we'll see in some of the examples. So start off with a quick question. If you invented something really cool, really exciting, that you believe in your heart of hearts could alter, disrupt, create perhaps an entirely new industry, is that enough for you to lay claim to success, or to be able to bank on that outcome leading to success? My position here, and the one that I'm going to pull apart on the hypothesis, is, well, it kind of depends. And more often than not, I would put forward the hypothesis that it depends on the method by which you're delivering the value. And the illustration at the bottom of the page really just kind of tries to jump in and talk about the distinction between a technology push where a clever idea, something that starts off as being cool, or as a technologist we become enamored with all the possibilities of what it could potentially do in a given market, is really about pushing a solution or pushing a solution looking for a problem to solve. Alternatively, and what we advocate for in the entrepreneurship and value creation class, is identifying a need, a problem that somebody has, that somebody could be literally an individual, it could be a group of individuals or an enterprise, and figuring out how best to solve that problem and deliver it in a manner that they're interested in paying you for, and ultimately leading in success. And that, in effect, is what you'll encounter when you look up the term, market pull, right? You've got a good fit between the nature of the problem or the opportunity and the means by which to deliver value that solves it. So let's get moving on, a few examples. I'm going to walk through and use some data and talk about some things that you're probably familiar with, maybe not so familiar with, but I'll try to educate you along the way. And I'll pause, from time to time. So if there's, any questions or comments in the chat window, Brent, if you wouldn't mind, just jump in and let me know if there's something that we should address while we're on a particular slide. I want to take us back to the microwave oven, something that probably all of you have in your apartments, in your homes, in your parents' homes, what have you. It's a bit ubiquitous in the United States and many countries around the world. But let's talk a little bit about its history and what led to its success and what it further enabled down the road. So if you weren't familiar with the origins of the lowly microwave oven, it actually was invented just after World War II, leveraging what was at the time novel technology, which was radar technology for determining the distance of objects in motion, etc. And so that was around 1946. For the better part of a decade, it was out in the commercial world, meaning the industrial / business world. But not really, being largely adopted. People didn't really know what to do with it. But some clever companies jumped in the fray in the mid-50s and created a home version or a consumer version. But again, the technology, the product, the solution was sort of a solution looking for a problem to solve. And for the better part of the next few decades, it really languished. It wasn't really a popular appliance. It wasn't something that was generally sold or purchased by homeowners. But that changed in the mid 70s. And what changed in the mid 70s was there was enough advances in production methods that enabled companies largely centered in Asia to produce a lower cost version in a tabletop version or countertop version. And so for the first time, the price point of the value that was being sold, which is really a value of convenience, came into the range of people that were willing to start to purchase it. And so in the mid 70s, an industry started to flourish around what they called TV dinners, frozen dinners and the like that were prepackaged and sold in the freezer section of the local supermarket. And you can still find them out there today, across the country. But that started to drive the home adoption. Correspondingly, right around that same point in time, the first of what I would argue was among the first wave of consumer electronics was invented. And this is the VCR. If you're not old enough to remember what a VCR is, it stands for video cassette recorder. It was the thing in which you used a VHS tape, which hopefully some of you still remember. You might have a few kicking around the house, or your parents do. They're largely eradicated now. They've been supplanted by other digital technologies. But if you're a child of the 80s and even into the 90s, you probably remember renting VHS tapes and popping them into the VCR at home, or using your VCR to tape record TV shows, et cetera, so that you can play them later on. This, again, it was invented in the early 70s, but it was mass marketed in the mid to late 70s. And so just as microwave ovens were starting to climb in terms of their US household penetration for delivering the element of convenience, VCRs similarly were being sold and purchased by homeowners that were interested in having a more convenient form of entertainment on demand. But even that pales in comparison to what really drove the successful businesses that took advantage of these innovations. So the innovation of the microwave oven brought convenience to cooking and heating foods very, very quickly and very effectively. The VHS and the VCR brought convenience to being able to consume media, but it was really the next couple of innovations that came along, the first of which was microwave popcorn, that really created completed the environment for driving the adoption of stay-at-home movie watching. And that in turn led to the wild success of blockbuster movie rentals, which fundamentally created the distribution platform on a broad basis for people across the country to be able to go to their local corner, pick up one of a range of movies or several movies, and buy the microwave popcorn, bring it home, and have entertainment over the course of a weekend, over a week. As a parent of 4 kids growing up in the 90s, this was our weekend routine. And I can tell you, we bought microwaves to make sure that we had the capability of not only heating food quickly, but to make popcorn. And we consumed popcorn, by the millions of tons probably. But it was really about launching Blockbuster as a business enterprise, which popularized the broad distribution of multimedia content in that environment. And so I would argue that it was Blockbuster was taking advantage of this innovation that took decades and decades and decades to actually come to fruition on a broad basis that led to its success. Having said that, that in and of itself didn't bestow upon Blockbuster the right to have enduring value. And as we all know, today, our means of consuming multimedia content is through streaming. And of course, we have Netflix to thank for creating the business model for altering that method of distribution of content. But it wasn't Netflix alone that created that. Rather, I would argue it was a very seminal event in 1996 that created the opportunity for that to happen. and I'll ask you to raise your hand, maybe put it in the chat box window, if you can explain to me what happened in 1996. But I won't hold you hostage to that. I'll just tell you it was the Telecommunications Act that was passed by the federal government that opened up the inclusion of internet services into the legislative regulatory environment for all telecommunication services. Up until that point, it was TV, radio, and telephone services. And so that act in 1996 created a tsunami of innovation that led to the tech bubble in 2000, but it also led to the technologies and the means by which a company like Netflix could even exist and create the ability to deliver on-demand, literal on-demand content directly into the homes, thereby supplanting the need not only to go to your neighborhood store like Blockbuster to rent those same movies, but also supplanted the need even for VHS tapes and VCRs. And so those all quietly, went the way of the dodo bird. I'm going to pause there and see if there's any comments that are coming up in the chat window, or if I should just continue on.
Does anybody want to chime in? I'm making a lot of comments about my use of Hotmail in the mid 90s, and really glad to see these examples. I was challenging the students to think about current examples of push and pull offerings in the market, and so glad that we ended up in the world of entertainment to align with your talk, Dan.
Yeah. Okay.
Ashley or Yadi, anybody want to chime in at this point? Any questions for Dan?
I think it's great. No, I just want him to keep going.
Okay. We will keep going. All right. Well, now we're going to kind of shift gears, and we're going to talk about digital photography. And again, some of you probably don't know this history. I happen to know it intimately because I grew up in Rochester, New York, and that is the home of Eastman Kodak, which some of you may have come across recently as in the news as having received or arguably received a loan from the federal government to create some medical chemistries in order to help relieve our dependence on foreign sources. Leaving that to the side, Kodak started off as a camera company. George Eastman was one of the early inventors of photography. The company itself is over 100 years old. Largely grew its business model off the backs of making and selling cameras, making and selling film, but most importantly, charging you to develop that film into the paper images that you would put in a picture frame or into a photo book, etc., that you would leave on your desk or hang on your walls, etc. Fast forward in 1975, Kodak actually invented digital imaging, and for decades did, I don't want to say nothing with it, but struggled to really capitalize on its disruptive capabilities. Now, looking at this chart, you would say, well, they spawned the compact camera industry, and that is true. Yet Kodak as a company was not the leader in compact cameras. That was generally companies coming out of Japan, Panasonic, Sony, and the like. You could argue that they, took advantage or capitalized on the fact that all that digital imagery led to other means of producing physical content, and that's true. They created the Kodak Gallery, and at its apex in 2009, they had 60 million users. Now, this was a place where when you're converting your film to digital, and they had a period of time there where if you had physical film, you could get the pictures loaded onto a compact disc in digital format. You could then put that on your computer. You could upload it to their gallery, or if you had a digital camera, of course, you could simplify that and just upload it directly to the gallery. And what was the purpose of the gallery? Was literally for Kodak then to charge you in order to produce physical images that they would then, mail you for hanging on your walls and doing what you might have whatever otherwise done with a physical photograph. So 60 million users, but they didn't charge the users for storing all that data. And, as a result, they just struggled to figure out the business model. So what happened in the meantime? In the meantime, the camera phone came along. And that camera phone was actually invented in 2000. And the Kodak Gallery was founded the year before. The iPhone came along 7 years after the first camera phone, and Android followed just a year later. In the meantime, you can see those yellow dots on the chart is actually the growth of camera phones. And the scale to your right, just so we're clear, is 10x the scale on the left. And so I do actually have another image that is very difficult to see in a pictorial like this, but effectively, we know the story around cell phones and the incorporation of the cameras. Everybody's got one. Billions of us have them. And so the scale is just enormously disproportionate. And in that intervening 3 years time from the point in time when Kodak had 60 million potential users, which today companies would absolutely kill to be able to lay claim to, they were bankrupt. Bankrupt as in they were slashing and burning and selling assets, including the roughly 1,000 patents that they had in digital photography for $525 million. Now, interestingly enough, who did they sell them to? They sold them to a consortium of companies: Apple, Google, Samsung, Adobe, there's Huawei. There's a long list. There's probably about a dozen companies that we all associate today with digital products and digital content that were the purchasers of those intellectual assets. And in fact, there were entire industries that were spawned by this digital photography capability. So I'm trying to make the point here, and this is where I'll pause again for just a moment, that even though Kodak was the inventor of this disruptive technology, they themselves didn't possess the means or the business model to be able to capitalize on that disruptive value. And instead, it was other companies that came in without the burden, shall we say, of existing business models to be able to create their own business models that could capitalize on this digital content in order to be able to monetize it and deliver value to us as consumers or as businesses willing to pay for that delivery mechanism of that content. And you can see the list here, and there's many more that continue to surface on a daily basis, and which continue to drive extraordinary value. Okay. Shifting gears a little bit and moving over now to the automotive industry, which is undergoing its own tectonic shift of technology. And so here we're going to focus on the electric vehicle. So in this example, let's talk about Volkswagen. Volkswagen is the world's largest vehicle producer, yet its market cap, it's the sum total of its the value of its publicly traded shares is around $116 billion. Certainly notable, but still not even as much as Toyota, who is the proud owner for several years running of the world's most popular vehicle. So you would think that of course would bestow upon them the right to some premium in terms of the value of the company. And to a certain extent, you could argue that they've got that relative to Volkswagen with a slightly larger market cap. Now, there are other factors, of course, that go into market cap as a predicator of the value of the company and how it's being realized. But now, when you look at Tesla, and you see that its market cap is nearly double that of either certainly of Toyota and nearly triple that of Volkswagen. Yet their sales are, significantly lower. They are nowhere close to being the world's largest vehicle producer. They don't have the world's most popular vehicle. But what is it that they have? Now, certainly there are other factors that go into market cap, as we said. and growth potential is certainly one of them. But I would argue that what people are buying, besides the notion of being ecologically sound and not having to be reliant on fossil fuels, which is a value proposition, certainly that they are monetizing, I would argue that what they are really monetizing is the sale of future features and functionality in their software versus the production of hardware that gets sold once and only once. And if you talk to dealers of conventional automotive OEMs, they struggle to figure out how to retain the value of a customer relationship with people that they're selling a fairly substantial purchase decision to. And it's very difficult to maintain that customer relationship. And so they try to do it vis-a-vis service, warranty service, and then hopefully follow-on service after your warranty period ends. Tesla goes about this completely differently. Yes, they still sell you a vehicle, but number one, you can only buy it at Tesla, and Tesla owns all their own dealers. And they sell you on the value of future features and functions that they will continue to provide you vis-a-vis delivery of software. And these are over-the-air updates that they just deliver directly to your vehicle while it's not being operated. And that is a huge value proposition because it allows them to retain you on an ongoing basis for the life of the vehicle in your possession. So that's a huge value proposition, a huge shift into a completely different operating model than either of the two largest companies in the traditional, automotive space. But it is one that is being emulated, most importantly, by Volkswagen. Volkswagen has swung the pendulum hard in order to be able to try to remain relevant in this future electric vehicle / autonomous vehicle environment by shunting all of its primary development into the electric vehicle space. And they plan on launching, I think, no fewer than 20 new models here over the course of the next 5 years. So it has clearly shifted the balance not only of how investors view the value of the company, but also has caused an underlying shift in how the automotive OEMs themselves deploy their capital. So again, arguing that the nature of the business model, taking advantage of the shift in the underlying technology, is what's of value here. Moving on in the transportation space, using a different example, we'll look at ride-hailing services here. Now, ride-hailing services have an interesting origin. The origins of Uber literally were the founders struggling to figge out how they could maintain this view of themselves as being, high flyer, young, hip partygoers, in order to be able to hire a limo or an otherwise, sophisticated ride to get them to, their bar hopping experience or going to parties, et cetera, et cetera. And so they came up with the idea of creating an Uber transportation model. And so the very early stages of Uber were about providing, luxury services to people who are willing to pay for it in order to get them, from dinner parties to bars to wherever they were going, really, but willing to do so at the click of a button. And so they launched in the, I think, mid-2010 timeframe. At exactly the same time that cell phones, smartphones in particular, were transitioning deeply into 3G and then from 3G into 4G. So data services, consumption through your mobile device, were starting to climb at quite substantial rates. And the chart just reflects that on the left, showing that the rate of penetration of smartphones in the market was exceeding 50% within 2 years of their launch. And then on the right-hand side, you can see where the chart on the left ends in December of 16. By that point in time, in Uber and Lyft's collective life cycle, they were already in excess of 50% of the market. So again, they didn't create the cell phone. They didn't create anything having to do with transiting people from point A to point B. What they created was a marketplace, a two-sided marketplace to attract people to act as drivers that they can be paid for and utilize their vehicles, leverage their vehicles in doing so, and providing a service to those of us who wanted to conveniently get to and from various locations. And they actually shifted their business model away from solely being, an upscale transportation service to being commoditized in effect, but having tiers of service that, you have Uber Pool and then you can have Uber Black, et cetera. So they've got a range of services that they offer. Their novelty, it's not to say they didn't invent anything or they didn't solve problems of a technical nature. Certainly they had to do that within the construct of their app and how it interfaced and how it tracked drivers and kept track of payment schemes, et cetera. So there's lots of technical problems they had to work out, but largely speaking, they wrote off the back of the cell phone. Which brings us to our last couple of points. And that's, when we start to dig into the underlying nature of most of the tech industries. And so this, discussion here has largely been about technology innovation and how companies take advantage of that innovation by using their business models. The underlying infrastructure of the technology industry itself has been undergoing changes, and then the mechanisms by which companies are exploiting those changes to deliver business models of their own is what's being illustrated here. And so on the far left, you have the traditional enterprise software stack and hardware stack for how companies traditionally would manage their IT services, let's call them. So everything from the networking within their enterprise all the way up to the types of applications that the companies would use. That started to break down when a couple of notable companies, for instance, Salesforce.com, Microsoft shifted to a SaaS model on the far right that delivered applications, sort of like a streaming service, if you will. But in the in-between, you also had innovation happening where people were taking the ability to virtualize data and offering that as a service. And so you have entire companies and entire industries that were built upon selling the infrastructure as a service. And then next to that, you've got the platform as a service where all you have to do is manage the applications and the data. And then a cloud services provider is basically providing you all that compute infrastructure, all the networking infrastructure, all the operating systems and virtualization, et cetera. And so entire industries have been created to deliver infrastructure as a service, platforms as a service, software as a service. Certainly it's been quite popular as a operating model and as a business model. But then when you start to look at how you then compete to take advantage of these types of underlying technologies that are available and these services that are available, you start to imagine both a vertical and a horizontal dimension to the nature of competing and delivering value. And so this is just a simple illustration, maybe not so simple, it's got a lot of graphics to it. But when you look at the vertically integrated companies like Alphabet, Amazon, Facebook, and Microsoft, they are very vertically integrated all the way from the consumer to the marketer in that stack of various services. And then on the far right, you've got companies that are more competing on a given horizontal. And so when you think about a company that you might be looking to launch, the technology that you're looking to exploit to your advantage, you should be also thinking about, okay, how am I actually competing? Am I competing in a vertical against perhaps some of these, very large and well-funded companies, or am I competing on a horizontal basis in one of these specific segments? And this is just one example, and you can redraw this example for the automotive industry. You can redraw it for nearly any industry. And to greater or lesser extent, there are companies that compete, all the way up the stack, and then other companies that are forming and competing and delivering value, on the horizontal. But this is my presentation for today. I hope it's given you enough to think about in terms of how you deliver value in the form of your business model, how you take advantage of technology that exists. It doesn't mean it leaves you free from having to solve technical problems at all. It just means that you're finding a different way, largely in this construct of reducing friction in a given enterprise to deliver value to the paying customers.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dan. Really appreciate all the time and energy you put into that presentation. We had a very lively discussion on chat as you were going through these various.
It's just this thing I signed up for.
Oh, sorry, Alex. I'm not sure if you were talking to us or somebody else in the room. So, but really quick to kind of sum this up, Dan, if you don't mind. One of the comments, in fact, it was made by Ashley, was understanding how the history of these stories of business models and market economics might influence everybody here on the doorstep of their careers or early in their careers. How might we learn from the past to influence our work in the future?
How are you?
Sorry, can you rephrase the question a little bit more briefly?
Yeah, maybe Ashley, do you mind jumping in and commenting on your comment?
I was just saying it's easy to always look back and see the patterns after it's already happened, but to be more innovative, you have to actually be ahead and be adaptable. So what are some tips or tricks to like keep your mind open and looking for that sort of thing?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And I was thinking about that as I was sort of assembling this. It is, you've got 20/20 hindsight when you're looking behind you at an industry or a given company or what have you. I mean, there's, I'm just glancing across the surface here. There's books and, case histories, written on each of these examples. Where I would come down on that question is, if you're in business and you're being asked, what's your go-to-market plan, right? What's your product market fit? People really have to consider, how are you delivering that value to your customer? Okay. I mean, like I said, you could look at the Uber example. They didn't go into this saying, hey, we're going to dominate the transportation industry and we're going to do it in the following manner. They simply wanted to solve the problem of looking like they were ballers when they were going out partying, and wanted the ability to do so, just by interacting through an app on their phone. But what they discovered along the way was that there was a huge appetite. Okay. So discovering what that market pull is, discovering what that appetite is, I think is clearly important. And that's the point that I was trying to make at the very outset of this. I've been in plenty of industries and plenty of businesses that were trying to push a solution into the market. And what you find is that you've got to educate the market. And if you're trying to educate the market and the market's just not getting it, or they're just not responding, it's not resonating with them, you start to figure that out. And so that, I would say, is a litmus test, right? So are people understanding it, and are they going, aha, I see what I can do with this? And are they the ones that are then pulling you forward? Are they turning around? Are they turning that equation around and starting to demand things from you? And I think it's a very tactical thing, but it's very important. And it's oftentimes overlooked and it's missed when you've got so many other things going on around you, in particular in a startup, that can be distracting. And that's why I would also argue that the points that I was making earlier about Marcus's and Gabe's discussion around being impatient and failing fast are important. Be impatient, push, and come to a very quick decision about whether or not you're getting that pull from the people that you're engaging. Now, it could be that you're engaging the wrong people, or you're engaging the wrong people in the wrong companies. And those things also cloud the environment. But if you're not getting people demanding more of you than you feel as though you can deliver, you don't have a fit.
Great. Thanks, Dan. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this segment of the session, and then we'll open it up for Q&A for those of you that can stick around. But Dan, really appreciate you giving this group some historical knowledge to draw on. So regardless of if our students are in a position to do a startup or a new product or a new service, my personal hope is that they're taking this narrative into the workplace and basically pulling the fire alarm as best they can within their departments or within their units or their organizations to say, we need to first be in tune with our consumers and the context of our consumers' lives and how they interact with our products and services. And then how do we be nimble enough and how do we be experimental and innovative enough to meet them where they are within that vertical stack of the consumer experience. So Dan, thanks again. I'm going to stop recording. I know you have a lot more to say on this topic, but again, thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll kick it over for a live Q&A right about now.